from sportbiketrackgear.com, and today we are going to install the driven carbon wrapped Superbike handlebar on our 2014 Yamaha FZ-09 Project Bike. At the end of this day, this is primarily a cosmetic modification. The handlebar looks gorgeous on this naked bike. It's out there for everyone to see. It's really gonna take the looks of the bike to that next level. Performance-wise, what's it gonna change? We're gonna alter the handlebar position a little bit. These have a little bit more sweep to them than the stock ones did. We'll kind of show you that when we get them off, and we'll compare the two. Let's talk about the project for a minute and the things that we're gonna need to facilitate this. You can reuse the stock grips. We're gonna show you how to do that in this video. Handlebar ends. The stock bar ends, or any bar ends that fit inside the stock handlebar, are not going to work with these. So we're going to install a set of the new driven D-access bar ends, of course, in that super sweet blue to match the wheels and the brake lines. Tools needed, standard hand tools. We need some wrenches, some sockets, some T-handles with Allens, and a drill. You're going to need to drill the locating holes for some of the controls on the new handlebar, and that's something we'll cover as we go through the installation process. Okay, we're gonna open this project up by disassembling the clutch side of the motorcycle. We're gonna remove the grazed bar end that we had already installed that fit in the stock bar. After that, we will slide the grip off. We're not going to be replacing the grips in this video. We are going to do another video installing a set of sweet driven grips. But for this video, I'm going to show you how to reuse the stockers. From the factory on the clutch side, there's going to be a lot of grip glue in there. I want you to get a long, thin, flat-bladed screwdriver, like so. And go ahead and kind of edge that in there, right, and then work it around, breaking the glue loose. Slide it in a little farther, continue around. You don't want to tear the grip up, that's why I'm using a kind of a smaller screwdriver here. But it's got to have a shank on it, long enough to get all the way in. Okay, so you break that loose, slide that out of there. You use a little compressed air. Off comes the grip. It's in one piece, we can reuse that, no problem. Put that to the side next to the bar end. We've got our stock mirror. Go ahead and thread that adapter right off of the clutch perch. Put that to the side. Loosen up our clutch perch. Clutch cable here. Loosen that up as much as we can, and we're going to line that up. Probably going to have to go down to the actual clutch cover itself and loosen the cable up just a little bit, because I need to be able to get the cable out of there. For now, we're going to rotate this out of the way. And our switch housing needs to be removed. Go ahead and take the screws out. There's going to be two screws that hold this in place. There will be also a plastic locator tab that is inside the housing, keeps from rotating around on the handlebars. Which housing kind of splits apart in two pieces, right? Like so, comes right off, and there is that locator tab right there. It's actually a hole in the handlebar in this area that we're going to reproduce on the driven bars. Now we need to deal with the clutch cable on the other side to get enough slack to remove it. I need to get some more slack in the clutch cable so I can get it out of the clutch perch up top. Got a 12mm wrench. I'm going to break loose one of the jam nuts down here at clutch cover area. I'm going to weasel that out of there like so, and that's going to give us the additional slack that we're going to need to get this bad boy out of there. Come up here, I tug on the cable. You see how I lined up the adjuster with the groove that is in there. Go ahead and slide this through like so, and off comes the clutch purse. Now we have the clutch side of the motorcycle ready to go. All right, we're good to go on the clutch side. Now we're going to start on the brake side. It's going to look a lot like what we did on the other side. We're going to begin with that sweet grazed bar end, which of course is a phenomenal option if you're going to use the stock handlebars. Remove that. No need to take the grip off here, because remember, that is part of the throttle tube. It's on the throttle tube. We're good to go. That stuff will slide right off. Next up, you'll see that the brake master and the mirror are one piece on this side, so there's no need to take the mirror off separately from the brake master. So we'll leave that mounted up. Go ahead and come over to our throttle tube, throttle housing assembly here. Got a couple of Allen bolts. Use the T-handle on these. These two bolts out, and then we will slide this protective cover here back, like so. Throttle housing comes apart, two pieces. And we'll just get our throttle tube and grip off. So, a little bit of lubrication on the handlebar. Smooth throttle action when you do that, and that's something we will reproduce when we put the motorcycle back together. Let's go ahead and get our switch pod off the bars. You can see this is a relatively simple process. I haven't used anything out of the ordinary in terms of tools, just standard hand tools. Show you the locator tab here for this switch. And then on the master cylinder. Like the clutch purse, the master cylinder is actually made to rotate. There is no locator tab on that. Slide this out of the way like so. Brake line's plenty strong. Okay, you can let it hang from that for just a little bit, not a big deal. The Spiegler brake line's interesting though. I've actually seen an entire motorcycle hang from one of the Spiegler brake lines. That's how strong those things are. They did it using a high-low and an SB-1000. Now for the handlebar itself, we need to loosen up the handlebar clamp. Pretty straightforward stuff here. We've got the 4 fasteners here. Spinner T-handle is pretty sweet for this part. Makes it a lot easier. Okay. Okay, now we're ready to begin installing the bars on the motorcycle. I compared the two handlebars, and with the driven Superbike carbon bars, they're going to be just a little bit lower, right around 1 inch, and they're going to sweep back about 1.5 inches more. So it's going to change the riding position just a little bit, maybe make it just a hair sportier. I measured the diameter of the tube using a micrometer, both the stock and the carbon tube, and they mic out virtually the same, so we'll be able to use our stock clamps. The carbon bar is shaped just a little bit differently, so one of the things I want to do right now is we're going to just loosen up the handlebar mounts so they're able to move with the bars as we put everything in position. To do that, I've got a 14mm swivel on a 12-inch extension with a 3/8 drive ratchet. I'm going to reach up in between the fork and the steering head. I'm going to locate that bar mount and then go ahead and just break it loose, just so it can move if it needs to as I install the carbon bar. It's right up in there. You can see now that's able to wiggle around a little bit. Go over to brake side of the bike. We're going to do the same thing. What I don't want it to do is I don't want the bar to be fighting the clamp. Right? So get up in here. It's kind of tight in there. Get on this fastener. I'll break this side loose as well. Just enough so these can turn if necessary. Now, this portion we're actually going to do sitting on the bike and make sure everything's lined up just right. First thing I want to do is get the bars in position here, wiggle around those clamps like so. Side here. Get these started, both sides. There are some markings on the driven bars that are going to help us get these lined up both side to side and front to back. Wiggle that around like so. I've taken a look at the bars and kind of mocked everything up previous to this to get an idea of where I want the sweep to be. And essentially what I want in the end is to have the zero position, right? And I'll show you what that means in just a moment. Just get these things started. First order of business is to get it even, right to left, centered inside bar mounts. I want to make sure that the gap that I have, both front and rear on the bar clamp, is even, and we want to maintain that evenness as we tighten the handlebars up. I want to get a nice even pull on the bar. What I noticed with the driven bar is it didn't just sit right in there exactly like the stock one did. The bars are shaped just a little bit different. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look down. I really want to find that 0 point as I look straight down. Take your time with this and make sure that you get a result that's going to be comfortable for you. You can always move it around later, just a little bit. I like the way that feels right there. Double check my gaps again. I like what I see there, so we're going to go ahead and I'm going to start snugging down the bar clamps. Once again, focusing on that nice, even pull, an even gap. Once I'm done with this, I will then tighten up the bar mounts where they meet the top triple tree. At the end of the day, that might have been a little overkill, actually loosening up the mount where it met the triple tree, but I think I'm going to get a better finished result. Okay, now we're going to start to mock up the controls. You can see I've already begun the process. I put the brake master cylinder on the motorcycle, right? And I actually sat on the bike. So I want to change the lever position a little bit. These were really straight out, and I wanted just a little bit more of a natural angle to kind of follow my hand position. Just like that is how I prefer it, so I can use the fingertips. So I've rotated the master cylinder down a little bit, and then I slid it in all the way until I had just a smidge of clearance right here with the gauge cluster. I've also got the bar end, the switch pod, and the throttle housing in place. What I'm trying to do is adjust the spacing here and make sure that I've got enough room. It's going to be a little bit of a tight squeeze. We changed the position with the master cylinder, so the switch pod is now going to ride in a different position, right, so that it can fit right in that neighborhood there. What I'm concerned with is the clearance between essentially the end of the grip and the bar end. I want to make sure we have good clearance there so there's nothing that will restrict the movement and or return of our throttle. The last thing you want is a sticking throttle. I'm happy with what I've got working here right now. So now it's time to begin measuring the locator holes. We're going to start with, obviously, the switch pod, because that is the first one in, and that's going to dictate essentially where the throttle housing is going to go. Now, see, I've got the throttle tube off, I've got the bar end off. What I want to do is I want to get this switch pod in position. Because I rotated the master cylinder, I'm also going to need to rotate the switch pod kind of in the same direction so that it has the ability to slide in underneath the master cylinder for maximum clearance. So it's going to need to sit right about there. And I'm going to take this piece of painter's tape and I'm going to use this to essentially mark the edge. I want to know exactly where the edge of the switch pod is going to be. Wrap that around real quick. Okay, so that's going to hold the edge for me. Now, what we need to do is we need to rotate this around until I've got good clearance down here. So we need to sit right about there. Let's go ahead and flip the top part off and get an idea of how close to the edge this sits. And at the end of the day, this is going to be in a position that is going to rotate just a little towards the rear of the motorcycle. And as you can see, it's very close to the edge of the switch pod. Got a center punch, automatic center punch. I'm going to come down here and go just inside, right where that's going to ride. Got to count for the size of the hole. And a little dimple there in the 3/64 drill bit. I found the size by matching it up with the stock bar, and then we're going to go ahead and drill our first locator hole. What you can do too is if you need more clearance, right? We've got the bike up on a stand right now. You can turn the handlebars. I'm going to turn the bike by moving the back end of it a little bit. Should buy me some additional space up here. Okay, the bar's so thick we didn't even need to pass all the way through. We drilled a hole that was deep enough that it allows that switch pod to sit right in there, and it is lined up perfect. That is exactly where I wanted that to sit. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and remove the tape that we used to mark the bar real quickly. Grab a couple of screws. We're going to throw this back in, and now we want to find the reference point for our throttle assembly. This is a critical part. I mean, this is really where you should spend the majority of your time if you want your project to turn out nice. I've seen guys drill clip-ons and handlebars and literally, you know, they take the grips off, the controls off, and you see they've got like 4 locator holes in there. Take your time, mock it up, be patient, and drill only one time. Let's go ahead and get this bad boy in place. We're going to be able to change the position of the throttle cables a little bit, because remember, I rotated that master cylinder down to get it in a more appropriate ergonomic position for the way I ride a motorcycle. Now we're going to go ahead and get our throttle assembly up here. And that's going to turn out just right, because remember, what I need at the end of the day is I need that throttle tube to be right at the end of the handlebar. With the bar end that we're using, right, I've got that boss right there, so that's going to buy me all the clearance I need and then some. You don't want a huge gap here, right, because then aesthetically it's just not going to look nice, but you want to make darn sure that when you let that throttle go, there's nothing that can restrict it at all. So we're good to go here. Now let's think about the throttle cables and the position that we want them in, and then we'll find the boss, mark it, and drill the hole just like we did before. To do that, we're going to actually take the throttle tube off, like so. And the important part here now is going to be the actual throttle cables themselves, right? So let's kind of get this thing put together here. Just loosely, kind of get it in position on the bar. We'll get the tape out. We're going to mark this thing just like we did on the switch pod. Okay, I'm done fumbling with the throttle cables, right? We got this put together. And what I want to do is, you know, I want to make sure that I'm not imposing on the brake lever, and that the brake lever is not going to come in contact with the throttle housing. That's really important. And I, of course, want to make sure that I've got it as inboard as possible, so we have all the room that we need to work with out here on the grip side. Like what I see here. Let's adjust the lever to its most inboard position. Got a big squeeze on it there. That would basically be all the way against the bars, and I think I want to run with it right there. Make sure we're all the way inboard. Same concept here. We're going to mark the spot with the painter's tape. Look at that gap. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take apart the throttle housing. Now I want to get an idea of exactly where that boss is located so we can drill the hole. So we're going to take this apart like so. The boss is on the bottom section of our throttle housing. So we can kind of slip this back in here like that. Have a look at that angle that we were working with. And we're going to go right here. Let's take this off. And what I want to do is familiarize myself with that angle. You can even take a Sharpie and mark it on the tape so you get an idea of where you want to put it. And you can clearly see that this is almost up against the switch pod. We're going to measure this gap, mark it on the bar, and then drill our hole for the throttle. Got the switch pod off now. I'm going to go ahead and show you exactly what we did to mock this up. First thing is we're going to locate the gap, or the angle, marking that right here with a Sharpie, okay? Second, which is pretty important, is we're going to take the portion of the switch pod that actually has the boss. and we're going to measure it to the center of the boss, remember, because that's where we're going to begin the hole. We've got ourselves about 18 millimeters there. I measured in 18 millimeters. I already used the automatic center punch, and I have marked the hole right where we want it. And we're going to go ahead and drill that. Same thing as before, we're not going to need to go all the way through. Just essentially need to recess it just enough that the boss and the throttle housing can drop in there and lock itself in place. Okay, locator holes are drilled. We're going to start off with our switch pod. So the first piece to slide into place here. I gotta tell you, my son Max is gonna be gutted when somebody actually wins this motorcycle. We've been riding all over the place on this thing. We're even going to baseball with it now, putting all of this baseball gear in the back, the backpack that I've got strapped on, and yeah, having a great time. This has been a super project for us. Might need to reorient the rear of the bike just a little bit and get to that screw there. Once again, if you're not working on a work table, you know, you're not gonna have to go through that part, but got it up in the air here, so just gonna get that off to the side. That should give me what I need. Switch pod into place here. And then we can get onto that throttle housing. Okay, and now for the throttle housing, I want to put just a little bit of silicone lubricant on the carbon bars, right? Make sure there's no debris from when we were drilling in the way. It's really important that our throttle action is just super smooth, right? Just a little silicone lube here. Just going to ensure that we get that result that we're looking for. Just a little across the bottom. Very thin film here. There's no reason to gunk this on there at all. That'll actually slow it down. So just a real thin film. And we're good to go there. Okay. Now let's go ahead and get this all in place. First thing we need to do is let's get our throttle cables in place in the actual throttle tube itself. And slides right in like so, wrap around, and then we'll get the other one in like so. Be a great time too to put a little throttle adjustment on this. It's something I've been wanting to do. It's got just a little bit of free play in it, and I've just been kind of compensating for it. But now that we're in here, we'll go ahead and adjust that out too and make the bike just a little bit smoother, which would be kind of nice, a little easier to ride. Make sure you keep the ring that goes between the grip and the throttle housing in that position. Don't let it fall inside throttle housing itself. Go ahead and start to slide the cables into place. Let's get the other piece, slide it over, get this throttle cable to begin to come together here. Like so, everything falls into place nicely. Slide the boot over. That's going to hold it together while we're putting our bolts in. Slide it in, and look for our hole. Okay, I have everything assembled. This gap is critical. I'm going to say that again. If you're going to spend a ton of time in any one place, this is the place. I got my throttle tube on and tight. I slid it all the way in, I held it in, I tightened down both the Allens. And remember, if your hole turned out to be a little bit further outboard than you wanted, you can go ahead and kind of wallow it out a little bit and take it a little further inboard, because there's clamping force here on the throttle assembly. Ideally, you want to hit it spot on. If you miss a little bit, you can do that because you do have good, strong clamping force right there. Now, what I want you to focus on is this gap right here. First, you'll see how the throttle tube is right there. The throttle tube itself is protruding out of the edge of the grip just a scotch, okay? Because remember, that's plastic. If that were to touch this, it's not going to grab. It's the rubber you got to worry about. Now we're going to take the bar end and we're going to slide that in until it's flush. I'm going to wiggle that throttle tube back and forth. And what I want you to focus on is how that gap looks, okay? No matter how hard I push on that bar end, I cannot get the grip to touch that. For the bar ends now, all we need to do is just go ahead and rotate these until the expanders stretch out. And of course I want to have the logo just right. Remember, for these bars, they have a different diameter than what we see with the hollow tube clip-ons. There are special driven adapters. Look to the website for that. We'll help you find them to facilitate your project on your bike. When we come back, we're going to be finishing up the clutch side. Okay, now we're on the clutch side of the bike. I've already slid the clutch perch over the bar. Got the gauge pod slid over the bar as well. Remember, for the clutch perch, there is no need to drill any locator holes at all. It's only the gauge pod that we're worried about. We're still using the stock grips on this bike at this moment in time. So to find our spacing over here, remember, we want it to look good and match the other side. What I'm going to do is I'm going to locate the gauge pod with the grip, because remember, the grip goes right against the gauge pod. So I'm going to try and find the end of the bar. It's going to be right about there. Okay, so that's how we're going to do that. Same deal as before. I'm going to roll with a little bit of tape. Come back to what we're doing. You could also measure the grip if you want to do that. Right about there is what I want to go with. Set that in place. Okay. Same thing, we're going to mark the distance using the tape. And now, let's go ahead and find that locator tab on this gauge pod. It's right here on the very front. Go ahead and rotate this thing around together like so. All right, right up against the tape. Let's have a look at our clutch lever, make sure we're going to be good to go there. Because remember, we're going to turn the clutch lever a little bit. We want to match what we've got cooking over there with our brake lever. And the gauge pod itself, it's going to have a little bit of an influence on that, right? The wiring for it. So we want to locate it appropriately. Take the Sharpie, and I need to come around right in front of the camera, of course, and mark that off like so. We got a pretty similar angle to what we're working with over there on the other side, and let's take a look at where that's pretty much. Virtually on the edge of the switch pod. Okay, so we're going to go just inboard of the tape. We begin to drill the hole. Rotate the clutch lever out of the way. Automatic center punch. Accommodate for the size of the hole. Like so. Remember, you don't need to drill all the way through, just drill into the bar deep enough. And we'll be ready to assemble the side hole, drilled in the bars. Now we're going to go ahead and bolt down the switch pod here on the clutch side of the motorcycle. It's come together pretty nice. It's a tedious project, But I think at the end of the day, once we get this thing all dialed in, right, with the bar ends, the carbon bars, we've got some super sweet driven grips that are going on it, some brand new driven California mirrors. This really dresses the bike up quite a bit. Even just getting rid of that silver bar in lieu of this carbon bar. Inexpensive, it's going to take you probably an hour or so to do it, you know, depending on how the project goes for you. It's not too difficult. Once we get this tightened up, we will go ahead and put the grip on, the bar end. We're going to tighten up the clutch perch, get the clutch lever adjusted, and then we'll share with you our closing thoughts, because there's a couple of key steps that we're going to want you to follow when we're done. We want to make sure that the motorcycle is going to be safe to ride, everything turned out good. Very, very important you do that. Okay. The grip itself, right? Realistically, if I'm putting grips on to stay, I'm using grip glue. Not going to do that because I'm going to be replacing these grips. To put the stock grip on, you can use grip glue. You can use a little bit of hairspray if you want to. Compressed air. Once all the air comes out, it'll begin to grab again. My preference is really going to be with the grip glue because I want that grip to stay in place. Bar end, just like the other side. Remember, you need special adapters to go with the Superbike bar. Same thing, twist it. We get our logos lined up. Okay. Now, we want to get to work on the clutch and the clutch cable. First thing that we need to do is we need to get our clutch cable back in, lever and in the perch. Do that, pass it through there, get it into the adjuster wheel, kind of rotate this around like that, jumped right in. We need to plug in our clutch switch. Okay, that's plugged in. Let's get on the motorcycle. Pretty picky about my controls. I want to make sure I've got this in the same exact spot that I do my brake lever. Put a little downward turn to this. Make sure we're not going to have any interference there with that gauge pod. Like what I see there. Gonna need to put that clutch cable back together. Down at the engine, right side of course. Our mirror assembly. Thread that back on. This is also going to be pretty temporary here because we are going to go with this. Jordan's got this brand new California mirror. It's going to look so good on this bike. We're going to be installing that. Now we need to come over to our clutch cable over here on the brake side of the bike. The cameraman just wants to follow me right around here. I'm going to go ahead and dip that back into place. This all dialed back in. Make sure you get these jam nuts tight down here so nothing comes loose. We'll finish the adjustment up top here. Okay, I'm happy with that. And remember, you can always, as you're buttoning up the project, if you want to adjust the levers just a little bit, once you get on the motorcycle, get your mirrors reset, make sure everything's tight, you can do that as well. The last thing we want to do is we want to get this thing off the stand. We want to rotate the bars, stop to stop, and make sure that there are no restrictions. The throttle returns nice and sharp. It's a very important step. Everything's buttoned up, it's tight, clutch cable's adjusted. Now what I want to do is I want to check the sweep of the bars. A little lower than before. Kind of like the position, feels cool, definitely looks good, no doubt about that. Throttle. Turn the bar all the way to the lock. Make sure it releases without restriction. All the way to the stop. Once again, releases without restriction. We spoke earlier about removing some free play from the throttle. You see I've got that little bit of free play there. And you kind of notice that when you're riding it. I've just been compensating for it with throttle control, essentially. To take that out, there is a boot right up here in the very front of the motorcycle on the throttle cable. Go ahead and I'm going to pull that out of the way so you can see that. I'm going to loosen up the jam nut, okay? And we are going to adjust that just a little bit and see if we can't remove some of that free play. You don't want to overdo it with this. Just want to dial some of that free play out. If you try to make it too tight, you can end up in a position where the throttle does not return properly, right? Idle's a little high. You don't want to do that. So you want to really take a minute with this and make sure you put it in that exact spot, because you want to have a little bit, just not a lot. Just a tad more with that. A great way to make sure you've got this just right is when you're done, start the bike, let it idle for a minute, turn the bars back and forth, and if you hear the motor start to pick up as you get the bars to one stop or another, you got that a little bit too tight, you're going to want to back it back off. Obviously make sure that you get in there, tighten the jam nut back up, put your protective boot back in place. And what you don't want to have happen is the throttle changing all on its own. Okay, so make sure you got the jam nut tight, get the boot back over it to protect everything in there, and you are good to go. In closing, I think the bars look amazing. There's no argument that they really bring the aesthetics of the motorcycle up a notch for sure. The project's not that difficult. If you're not comfortable doing it, remember, this video does not supersede a licensed mechanic or a service manual. If you're not comfortable doing it, take it to a licensed mechanic. It's going to make it right for you, no worries. This is the driven carbon superbike bar install on our 2014 Yamaha FZ-09 STG